My warm greetings to everyone. My name is Anna Sienkiewicz. I belong to the Evenki people from the Russian Federation. Since last year, I'm the WIPO Indigenous Fellow, and today I have the pleasure to moderate this webinar, How to Protect and Promote Your Culture, Collective Marks and Certification Marks. I would like to invite Mr. Wendt Wendland, the Director of the Traditional Knowledge Division of WIPO, to make a welcoming remark. Wendt, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anna, and good afternoon and good evening and good morning to all of you. I believe we have almost 130 participants, which is really wonderful. The mission of WIPO is to lead the development of a balanced and effective global intellectual property ecosystem to promote innovation and creativity from wherever it comes for a better and more sustainable future for everyone, including Indigenous peoples and local communities. And I'll use the acronym, if I may, IPLCs. So even though the existing intellectual property system, the conventional IP system, doesn't provide solutions to all IPLCs issues, and far from it, but in fact, insofar as traditional knowledge and cultural expressions go, the existing IP system can play a crucial and immediate role and benefit IPLCs. For instance, intellectual property tools can be used to maximize the economic value of products and services based on or related to TK and TCEs. So with this in mind, our publication, Protect and Promote Your Culture, a practical guide, explains how, with plenty of examples, Indigenous peoples around the world have made the most of intellectual property rights. And inspired by this publication, our division, this is the TK division at WIPO, came up with the idea of organizing this webinar series based on the guide. And the purpose of these webinars is to show real stories of the use of IP rights by IPLCs. We trust that this series will be of interest to IPLCs, officials, IP experts, and others who wish to learn more about the application of intellectual property rights in this particular area. Each webinar will address a specific IP right or specific IP tool, and in line with the TK division's approach, we intend for this series to be very practical and participatory in its approach. So with these few words, I'm delighted to welcome you all today to the first in the series, which is dedicated to certification marks and collective marks. You'll be in the very competent hands of Anna Sienkiewicz, who has just introduced herself, our current Indigenous WIPO Indigenous Fellow, who will moderate the webinar. And I'd also like to acknowledge the contribution in the design and organization of the series of Begonia Venero, my colleague from the TK division. So with those few words, thank you for participating. A very warm welcome from myself and the rest of the team. And Anna, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Wendt, for your kind words. And first of all, please let me introduce to you briefly the agenda of our event and housekeeping rules of the webinar. So today we will have 3 speakers, 2 ladies from Indigenous peoples and local communities, and an intellectual property expert. After their presentations, we'll move to the question and answer session. To ask a question, please use the question box that you can see on the right side of your screen. You may send questions anytime during the webinar, and you could identify to whom you would like to address the question. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. The recording of the webinar will be made available on our website, as well as the PowerPoint presentations of the speakers that we will have today. I will introduce to you the first speaker shortly, but first of all, we would like to get to know better our audience. I will start the first poll shortly and would like to invite you to tell about yourself. So which statement describes you best? Are you a member of indigenous people or local community, or intellectual property expert, maybe government official, or perhaps none of these options suits you? Because I believe we have a representative of academia and NGOs attending this webinar. So I will give you 10 more seconds to answer this question. And okay, I'm closing the poll soon. We'll give you 10 more seconds because I see that our attendees are still replying. Okay, okay, so let's move to the results. So apparently today we have quite a few members of indigenous people and local communities, around 25%, and a bit more than this, we have 30% of intellectual property experts attending, and also government officials and other who are interested in our webinar's topic today. So I believe that the presentations of today will be of interest to all of you. And now I have the pleasure to introduce to you the first speaker, Ms. Dorcas Gombe Mbambeta. Dorcas is a basket weaver from the Taita Basket Association that is based in Taita Taveta County in Kenya. She has 12 years of experience in basket weaving, and her passion for basket weaving comes mainly from her cultural background, having been born and bred in Taita grassroots. For your information, the Taita Basket project was undertaken by WIPO in collaboration with the Japan Patent Office under the funds entrusted arrangement. It had an objective of supporting indigenous basket weavers in Taita County to use intellectual property tools to effectively enhance competitiveness. Dorcas will tell us more about it as well. I am very much looking forward to learning more about Dorcas' personal and her community experience of using the Taita Basket collective mark. So Dorcas, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, my name is Dorcas Gombe Mwambeta from Taita Basket Association. I have this opportunity to say progress of Taita Basket Association. Taita Basket Association was registered in 2016, supported by World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO. The objective was to promote the basket using intellectual property system with an ultimate goal of improving incomes through increased sale within and outside the county. The initial membership was 14 groups within Taita. We do hand weaving to make unique quality baskets using natural resources from sisal fiber and natural colors that do not fade. Personal and community experience. We have more than 12 years experience in basket weaving and 5 years under WIPO using the Taita collective mark. The collective mark has a sisal, heel, and the basket, where the heel represents the environment, the sisal represents our main source of raw material, and the basket represents the main source of production. Our passion for basket weaving is mainly from our cultural background, having born and bred in Taita grassroots. It inspires us using the culture from one generation to another since we got it from our great-grandmothers. WIPO through JICA supported us on training for quality standards and design, sourcing for external market. The importance of basket weaving to the community. It maintains our traditional culture since Taita women represent a basket. income generating activity, which has improved standard of living for women, families, and the community, which has helped women in paying school fees for their children, building house, farming, and dealing with basic wants. Interacting with people give us a broader view of life and exchange of ideas. It has helped women being independent, and this has reduced gender-based violence in the community. It has helped us famous not only in the country, but worldwide, since we have name tags. It has also helped us use the natural resources, that is the sisal and the dyes. The idea of having collective mark. We had an idea of having a collective mark because market price were affected by middlemen and women and brokers who took advantage of the widows, single mothers, family groups, and asked for support through the county government of Taita Taveta, through the Department of Trade, which offered us trainings program. Through the training programs, with the county government in partnership with WIPO, JICA, and IP, we were able to register our groups, Taita Basket Association. And this has helped to protect our basket weaving culture so that other groups does not invade. Registration of association. After the registration of association, quality baskets weaved has greatly improved, and this has created demands of basket both within and outside markets. County government of Taita Taveta through the Department of Trade has set aside a monthly show and a market in Voi, where the association will showcase and market our basket. Through this initiative has promoted the basket and improved the market sales for the association. The registration also has protected our basket weaving culture. And through the association, more baskets orders has increased. This has increased our sales. Plans for basket weavers. To grow into our own establishment. Ready markets worldwide, and to reduce poverty in the community. So we welcome you again in Taita to come and see the heel, the sisal, and the baskets we weave. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dorcas, for sharing the story of your association and the Taita Basket project. We have made a separate recording of your presentation, but I still would like to provide with the Q&A session and ask you a couple of questions. First of all, I would like to learn more about the beautiful and colorful design of the collective mark that the Taita Basket Association is using. How did you choose the particular design of your collective mark?
First, in Taita, we have a lot of hills. And in fact, in Taita, in where we have our basket, we have a big hill. That's why we chosen the hill. And the sisal is our main source, raw material of making the baskets. And the basket itself, we think that when you put the heel, we put the sisal and we put the basket, it will attract more buyers. Because they wanted to know what about this heel, what about the sisal, and what about the basket. So we tried, when you put the sisal, we focus on our main source of material because our baskets are woven through the fiber from the sisal. So, and the heel and the sisal also represent also our environment. It keeps our environment cool. We have a fresh air and so many others.
Thank you. Now, after your explanation, I can see much more behind this design. It has a close connection with your community, your baskets, and the area where you are living. I see it as a nice way to refer to your community's culture and the products you are offering. My next question is, have you and your community noticed any changes since the association started to use the collective mark?
Yes. A lot of changes. The sales, you have increased the sales. The quality also has improved. Because when you weave a basket, it should meet the standard of the association.
Thank you very much, Dorcas, for your wonderful presentation. And now, I would like to move to our next speaker. Please let me introduce to you Kristina Heda.
Oh, sorry. Kristina belongs to the Sami people. She is the head of the cultural unit in the Sami Council, an organization that works to strengthen the Sami arts and culture field across the borders, where the Sami people live, in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. Kristina's background is from 20 years in the Sami cultural field, especially with Sami festivals. Today, in her presentation, Kristina will speak about her and her people's experience using the Sami Doji certification mark. Kristina, the floor is yours. Yeah, Kristina, we can see your slides perfectly and can see you. So, yeah, you could start. Just unmute yourself, please.
Okay,
Perfect.
now everything should be set. Thank you so much, Anna and everyone, Kiihtu, for having me and inviting me to speak during this seminar. I have been really looking forward to it, so thank you so much. And I especially look forward hearing and learn from the other indigenous communities. So as Anna said, my name is Kristina Hatta or Ristinja in Sami. I belong to the Sami people, which is indigenous people colonized and divided into 4 different national states. Norway, which is the side of the border where I live, Sweden, Russia, and Finland. And I work in an organization called the Sami Council, which is an organization with member organizations in all of the 4 countries. We were established in 1956 and are today one of the oldest still active indigenous organizations. We still have a very active and important role also in the Sami community. The Sami Council's primary work is to work for a united Sami and recognition for the Sami people as one nation across national borders. In addition to work within Sami and towards the national authorities. The Sami Council also works internationally to promote and secure Sami rights and interests, mainly through our 4 different units: the EU unit, the Human Rights unit, Arctic and Environmental unit, and the unit that I run, the Cultural unit. The Sami Council works to strengthen the Sami arts and cultural field as one united field. And we work for the cultural field in many ways. We have a Sami cultural funding. We work to influence and develop Sami cultural policy making. And we work to ensure protection of Sami culture and cultural elements, which we see as our common property of the Sami people. And we also work to support our Sami industries, for example, through the work of the Sami trademark system, which I have been invited to talk about today. I forgot to change the slide, but here's a map over Sapmi. Sapmi is in red, and it's a picture of me and my ahku, my grandmother. We are from Vuotikäinu, Kautokeino, there up north. The Sami Council's trademark project is a project we have developed together with the Sami cultural industry since the 1980s. Sami culture has a huge value both on national and international level. Sami industries and companies often base their products on our culture, and it is in those products the great market interest also lies. For the development of Sami industries and also our society, it is a significant challenge that the Sami culture property is not protected. We constantly experience that Sami industries, products, or other Sami cultural elements are stolen, misused, and copied. We see it a lot in tourism, in the film and music industry, in design, and we often see our national symbols being used or misused, especially the flag. And we see others selling our culture with fake labeling, giving the consumer an impression that their products are locally and Sami made. As you can see from the picture, the fake labeling could be picturing Sami people on the label, or this, which is my favorite in the middle here, proof of authenticity. This product is handmade in Lapland of native natural materials. One of the biggest challenges for the Sami people today is the fact that those who make most money of the commercialization of the Sami culture is not the Sami people. We also experience that consumers do not have enough knowledge to distinguish between Sami produced products and fake copies. All of this puts the Sami traditional and modern industry in a very weak position, where we are taking away the possibility to create a living of our own culture. And it also threatens the Sami culture at large. Already in the 80s, the Sami Council, together with the 4 Dochi organizations, saw a need to establish the Sami Dochi mark, with the purpose of giving the consumers information and a choice to buy genuine Dochi, which is Sami handicraft. Today, we are also working with a second certification mark for Sami produced product, Sami made.
Unmute.
With our trademark project, we want Sami handicraft and Sami products to be visible, to be recognized, and to be preferred in the market. That is our main weapon in the war against the fake copies, the power of the consumers. We experience that the consumers see the value in the genuine produced Sami products, which are produced by local indigenous people and supports the local community. Whether it is a traditional guksi, a cup, or a Sami-inspired blanket. And we believe that the consumer wants to choose Sami Dochi handicraft or Sami-made products if they were given the knowledge to choose. We wish to give the consumer a good experience and a sense of security that they have chosen a Sami-produced product or Dochi. The trademarks will also raise interest and tell a story about the product and the Sami culture, where we ourselves are the authors. It is definitely also a method of self-determination in many ways for us. Many of the Sami companies today are small businesses, too small to build their own strong brand, make necessary networks, and stand out in the bigger market. It is too time consuming. Through our trademark project, our goal is to make our product producers and products visible and provide a greater opportunity for increased sales. For the industries and companies, the trademarks will strengthen their competitiveness and the opportunities for increased profitability within both well-known and new markets. It will also strengthen the cooperation between Sami businesses, build knowledge, networks, facilitate discussion platforms within the field, and contribute to a development of stronger businesses with more secure markets. A strong Sami trademark system will mean legal and economical protection and support for Sami industries, and thus help to protect the Sami culture and contribute to the increased welfare for the Sami population. Our biggest challenges so far and threat to the project has been to secure the project with enough funding and financing. In the next phase of the project, we are now working to secure financing for a 5-year project period, where the aim is, among other things, to build an economical, sustainable future and a stronger stand in the market. And I believe that was what I had the time to, but I will be happy to answer any questions. Ologiihtu, thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina, for your wonderful speech and slides. It was really interesting to learn how your people came up with this idea to have a trademark, and how you are kind of fighting in this, as you said, war against the fake products, which is I assume quite a big problem for many communities. So now I would suggest to start a second poll and ask you second question. So yeah, we would like to see which statement best represents your experience with collective marks and certification marks. So maybe you're an intellectual property expert, so you're familiar with these issues, or you might have basic knowledge in these intellectual property tools, or maybe you are a member of indigenous peoples or local community who registered one or more collective marks and certification marks, or maybe your community is considering applying for these intellectual property tools, or yeah, maybe you're not familiar with collective marks and certification marks at all. I will close this poll in 15 seconds, so please think about which statement best represents about your experience with collective marks and certification marks. And I see that Dorcas, she's still having connection problems. So I would suggest after this poll, we will move to our intellectual property expert who will tell us more about collective marks and certification marks. But first, please, let's see the results. So apparently, we have quite a few intellectual property experts, almost a half, and also quite a few of our attendees have basic knowledge on collective marks and certification marks. And I also see that we have some community who already registered collective marks and certification marks or considering to register it. And yeah, 15% of our attendees are not familiar at all. Okay, thank you for providing these answers. It's really good to know. So now we'll change a bit our agenda, and now I would like to introduce to you Mr. Jacob Adams. Jacob is an intellectual property lawyer admitted in various jurisdictions in the United States and New South Wales, Australia. And he is currently an associate professor at the Business School of the University of Stavanger, Norway. In his work, he primarily focuses on the protection of indigenous intangible properties through the use of intellectual property laws, and has worked on many high-profile projects involving indigenous intangible properties. So in his presentation, Jacob will tell us some perhaps basic about collective marks and certification marks for those who are not familiar with them at all, and will explain how these intellectual property tools could be useful for indigenous peoples and local communities. So Jacob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for having me here. I'll just get my slides. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate being part of this webinar. And it's great to be on a panel with such great indigenous people that are working with their communities to establish these type of protections. I thought we'd start a little bit. I didn't know exactly the level of experience that the attendees have with specifically certification and collective marks. So I thought that we'd start first with a bit of basic trademarks, just to see where they fit in. And of course, we could start with statutes and with kind of the legal structuring of trademarks and what they do and their functions. But I like to kind of be a little more general with the ideas of trademark protections, because the statutes and law kind of follow these general ideas. Two things to take from the statutes particularly, though, are the concepts that a mark is to distinguish these products and also, or services, and also to identify the source of them. But that doesn't really give a full idea of what a trademark kind of does. And I sketched down a few just ideas of what a trademark does and can do and how it can be used. And one of the basic ideas that I like to use talking about trademarks is that they're really a protected means to communicate with a consumer. And Christina kind of touched on that the marks that the Sami community uses, they look to inform the consumer and educate the consumer. And the mark is kind of the vehicle for that, to kind of tell a consumer or general public or those who don't have an in-depth knowledge of these products and services or even peoples, to tell them very quickly what something is and allow them to make a decision. Marks also do the identification, the distinguishing products and services, but they're also vehicles for marketing, vehicles for kind of encapsulating value of communication or something that surrounds the elements that surround this product or service. Those, of course, were general ideas on trademarks, as a broad umbrella. But there are many species of trademarks, and each one does their own particular thing, and each has their own kind of structure that supports it, and for interest in us, a particular function and use that it's designed to address. The species that I kind of look at generally, or that we'll look today specifically at certification and collective marks, but there are also things like geographic identifiers that do a different thing, and other trademark-like protections. For certification marks, the kind of general idea is that the mark itself is something that's owned by an entity, but that entity doesn't particularly use it. They actually certify the products and services of others, and then these other entities that are providing those products and services, they use the mark to indicate that whatever that product and service is, it conforms with a standard, whatever that standard may be. And it's that standard that is kind of controlled by the mark owner. And it's the mark owner that tests these products and services according to a standard. Instead of looking at a kind of, I guess, particular marks that look at indigenous communities or some that are kind of smaller, there are these larger certification marks that many people are familiar with, but might not see them exactly as something that's a certification. Three that I like to use to kind of show this are the Underwriter Laboratories Lab mark, the Energy Star mark, and the Windows WHQL or hardware certification mark. I think these show the functioning of a certification mark very well, because anyone can apply for these marks. Anyone can take in their product and ask for it to be tested according to the standard of each of these individual owners or mark owners. And that's all that these mark owners do with these marks, is they'll look at this product and say, does it or does it not actually conform? And each of them are designed for a different thing. Underwriters Laboratories is more liability on consumer products, making sure that it conforms to power standards and consumption standards, and that Energy Star is in a somewhat environmental mark to look at the use of power of larger consumer electronics. And then the Windows mark, many of you might actually have this on the machines that you're using now. It's one that just says the machine that you're using or that this mark is on, that it has been tested by a lab to say that it conforms to the standard required by the Windows operating system or by Microsoft. And it sounds kind of simple, but it makes sense that this is an important thing, so that you know when you buy a computer that what you want to put on it will actually work, that it's been through this process, and that it actually can use these programs, that they'll function properly. But it's also, these are also good to show how these marks fit within a system that, Underwriters Laboratories or the Energy Star owner or Microsoft, they don't use these marks themselves. They're not for the owner. They're for these other companies to then tell you what that company's product can and cannot do, what it's certified to do. Collective marks usually are lumped together with certification marks by the general public, or even in certain legislations, they have a common umbrella term of collective marks, and then underneath that will kind of make the distinction between the two. But collective marks, they function much differently, because they're not looking at at a product or a service particularly, they're actually looking at whether the entity or person involved in a product and service is essentially part of a club. If they have met the kind of standards, if they've met the requirements to be a member of that club. And for a lot of people, this may seem kind of like the same thing as a certification, but it's actually focusing these requirements at a different level and in a different way, so that they don't really address the same needs or concerns. And we'll look at that a little bit more later. But one of the marks that I like to use to kind of show this type of structure is is kind of professional marks. The one that I picked today is the American Board of Medical Specialties, that when you go to a doctor in the US, they have been tested, they meet these requirements to be a member of this group. And by being a member, they then advertise to you that they've taken these tests, that they're qualified in some way. But this has some interesting effects on how these are seen in the market and what they do to market products and services that we'll look at in a little bit later. Generally, if someone asks me what these species of trademarks, what these species of protections do, I like to just give them something very simple to understand. And for these particular types of marks, I like to say that certification marks kind of protect the how a product was made, how a service was made or offered, in that, does it conform to the standards? Does it have the attributes and qualities necessary and required by this certification? Whereas collective marks, they don't really look at that aspect of it. They look at by whom was this made or provided. And that's where they're actually testing the requirements. Now, if we kind of look at this a little bit more, and I spoke about it just previously, but certification marks, they look at the end result. That's where their focus is. That's what they kind of concern themselves with. And this shows up in the structuring of this protection, in that you have to have a really good standard. That's kind of the rules by which something is tested, by which that product and service is tested. This is important when we talk about Indigenous communities and an implementation of this, that it's this standard that has to be very clear, and it has to be thought about very thoroughly. And the other important thing is that it has to be objective, that a lot of times these subjective terms that we use, or goals or aspirational terms, they're very difficult to then translate into an objective standard that will function in a certification. Because we kind of look back to what I said previously, that anyone can ask for a certification and be tested according to the standard. And it's very difficult to then take that standard, if it's subjective, and start testing all of these products and services that are requested. Collective marks, on the other hand, are looking at that creator, the entity that provides a service or creates a product. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the end result is going to be the same. It's merely looking at that embodiment of the producer, the person who's providing this thing. This is an interesting aspect of how you can use the implementation of these two different protections for different results. One looking specifically at the products and services, but one looking merely at the person who's doing that. Also, even though it's good to focus on objectivity, subjectivity can be worked into the structures of a collective a little more easily than you can translate it into an objective standard for certification. Looking more at that particular aspect, though, this subjectivity, objectivity element, I think this is one that's very important to consider and think about, particularly in the Indigenous context and in the implementation of these protections. Because, as we said, the aspirational terms, they're very difficult to be objective with, but you can still reach the goal. And in many implementations or many desires to see protections, you see that people want things that protect or exude quality or sustainability. But it's necessary to then ask, what does that mean, particularly for that product or that service, or even that group or a smaller division? And by testing and kind of questioning that aspect of it, not only does it develop a very good conversation on what the elements are that are very important to communities, but it also allows the translation into objective standards to be much clearer, and then make a stronger system. But at the same time, being too objective can lead to its own problems, much like being too subjective leads to problems. Being too objective and focusing on kind of crystallizing these elements in a very hard system, sometimes that will lead to stifling of any development in that area. And we see this in larger discussions when it comes to self-determination and self-governance of cultural aspects, that to kind of freeze these elements in time and space, they can have a negative impact on a community. To then say that you don't have the ability to develop and to evolve a culture into wherever you'd like. So looking at kind of dissecting things into very objective standards, like for a certification mark, you have to remember that flexibility must be built in to allow that development, while still trying to be as clear and non-aspirational as possible. The subjectivity aspect of it, and it adds its own complications, that even in a collective system where looking at adding subjective type requirements, quality control checks in a more general area or level, kind of those mentor and peer quality control looking tests, those type of systems, if not grounded in some objective agreed upon elements, can lead to politicization of the system, or looking at the club becoming kind of a closed group of friends and then not addressing a general need of a community or addressing the goal for which it was established. So there's a balance there on both ends of how we integrate these kind of desires and goals of a protection into the functional form of these particular species of trademarks and protections. If we look more at the context, particularly with Indigenous communities, on how these work, both certification and collective systems, it's good to remember kind of the limitations of what can be done with a protection through trademarks and collective means. And one that it's kind of, it has been difficult for some to understand when we're talking about these things, and particularly implementing protection systems, is that they don't actually address the larger concern, like Christina brought up, with having spurious fakes flooding the market, having that type of competition that traditional producers and service providers have to now compete with. Certification and collective systems, they don't directly prevent that. they don't actually stop a fake from being made or even being sold. What they do, kind of looking back at how we began this, was provide the information to the consumer to make their own decision. And in that, we kind of rely on not only the desire of the consumer, kind of assuming that they are seeking the genuine, which I think we believe they are looking for, but also setting up a system whereby we can educate the consumer and kind of instill that desire within them. One of the major issues that is encountered within the products and services market in Indigenous communities is that many consumers, they don't even know where to find genuine, or they don't have the means to identify genuine or not. And that's where certification and collective marking systems can really make an impact. That you can now very easily communicate with the consumer that this mark means genuine. And by doing that, you distinguish the non-genuine without having to comment upon it or without having to directly address it. You can very easily make that distinguishment between the two. And just by doing that, the consumer then has much more power to make a proper and appropriate decision on where they place their money, what products they want to seek, and what services they'd like to actually seek out and use. These marking systems can also be implemented for very particular type of goals, or they can be much more general in nature. And that's something that has to be considered kind of at the beginning of establishing protections, looking at the goals and then kind of testing exactly what that means to a group or an Indigenous community, and then tailoring that protection to that goal. Often, many people will see that a mark is a kind of a goal in and of itself, that it may bring with it some type of protection just by existing. But that's not exactly the case. These need protection, support, maintenance. They need that type of shepherding to become functional, and marketing and developing that identity. But at the same time, they also need to be tailored to a particular goal. Just by getting a mark and not having the depth or direction to it, while not addressing what may be of concern, it could also become kind of a burden upon a community to then be dealing with a non-functional mark and not knowing how to direct it to do what it needs to do. So these kind of questions need to be addressed in the beginning, looking at the goal, looking at if it's a particular product or maybe even class of products that need to be marketed in a certain way, that need a certain type of protection. Or if we're looking at something that's more general, maybe general on a people level, looking at more of an identity protection, something that would lean towards a collective mark. Or if it's something much more general, like Christina looked at the Sami Made mark, where it's grounded in certification, but its requirements, the standard is very low, so as to kind of be the broadest foundational identity mark protection for the Sami people. All of those things need that consideration, and then it tells you and dictates not only the structuring and the requirements, the standards, but also which of these functional pieces can be put into place, which of these tools can be used for that particular issue. Also in this slide, I think it's good to remember that although we talk products and services, being a little more specific in that is good to have the ideas of where these can make an impact, because really they can be tailored for whatever is the need, whether that be tourism products, whether that be tourism services, or whether that be food, even something like teaching and education. In many communities, there's a lot of discussion about how the passing on of information, how the education of other generations or even outside majority community members, how they can kind of learn, but that the learning about that community is done in such a way that you're actually instilling the proper values, the proper education, the cultural education and societal education concerning those indigenous communities. That type of stuff can be certified, or it can be put into a collective marking system. That's one of the reasons that I like using professional collective marks as an example when I discuss these things, because not only is that an element that we looked at with that American Board of Medical Specialties type of mark, but it can also be seen in certification marks for teachers, for any sort of type professional. So it's the application of these protections is very powerful and very broad and can address many different needs in the community. Looking specifically at indigenous communities, there are existing certain systems that have been implemented outside of the two that we have here today, the Samitwichi mark, the Taita basket marks. The two that I like to use are particularly the silver hand mark and the Made in Montana mark, or the native Made in Montana. The reason that I like to use these is not only to show kind of implemented systems and how they can have an impact, but today it's to look at the structuring and to look at how they fit within a community and how they're used. The silver hand mark is kind of a freestanding mark on its own, established to address the need of the Alaska Native people, particularly when it came to arts and crafts. The native Made in Montana mark is more of a mark that is within a larger system, within the Made in Montana system, which consists of the Made in Montana and Grown in Montana certification marks. The other contrast between these two is how they were implemented. In the silver hand mark, this is one that is actually integrated into the statutes of the state of Alaska. And the way that they articulated it within that statute, not only is it as it's seen on the screen, but each of those kind of highlighted terms are then further defined in the statute. And I don't have a good slide for it now, but particularly of interest is the term art and original article. These two terms have an exhaustive list. Not exhaustive in the meaning that it's very long, but exhaustive in that it's crystallized, it's finalized, a list of elements that allow it to qualify as a piece of art or as an original article for the system. And what's interesting about that type of an implementation is with that articulation, the way that it's worked is that oftentimes it's criticized that it doesn't leave that space for development, that the materials that are required, they don't address kind of a modern need for a modern craftsman. And that's not a kind of a debate that we'll go into. To change those elements requires a change of the law in the state of Alaska, which then requires, lobbying legislators, looking at all that type of statutory development system. So it makes it kind of difficult to modify that if there is any developing need of the indigenous community. The native made in Montana mark, it's similarly implemented, not, I believe, in regulation, not specifically in law in Montana, but it takes kind of a different approach to the requirements. They're more broad when it comes to use. Remember, it's part of a larger system where this system is divided into essentially kind of consumer products and agriculture products, items that have to be made in Montana according to a relatively simple set of requirements, and similarly things that have to be grown there. When they added on this element of the native made, the only requirement there, or additional requirement, was that the applicant needed to be a tribal member of a Montana tribe and resident in the state of Montana. So that threshold was very low, but within that protection system, it's very effective to do what it needed to do, which was identifying these types of products and services as something different, as something that needed its own identification and rather its own protected means of communication with the consumer. Those are kind of the basics that I wanted to present today and go through with everyone, and I hope it provides kind of a foundation to begin the discussion. It was by no means a comprehensive discussion on the legalities of these type of things or even the implementations, but I hope it provided a better understanding of how they can be used and implemented and thought of, and what they kind of generally can and can't do, or what they're meant to address. But I also hope that one of the things you'll take away from this is how powerful these tools can be when implemented correctly, when the standards are clear, when the structures are there, and when the support is provided. I firmly believe there is a large desire out there in the general public to have genuine items, or rather a large desire to not be supporting non-genuine, and being able to develop these protections that we can clearly communicate with the consumer that these items are genuine, these are things that you want, has such a follow-on impact for Indigenous communities when it comes to economic stability and economic development, and even securing the survivability of cultural elements of cultures, wholesale. So I hope that this provided a little insight and a little foundation for the discussion, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob, for the slides and for the presentation you had. It was really interesting and useful to learn more about collective mark certification marks, and yeah, in particular, how they can be useful for Indigenous peoples and local communities. And I believe we already have received some questions. So we just received a question from the floor. If the webinar will be recorded, the answer is yes, it will be, and the recording will be available. And now, Dorcas, can you hear us and see us? So, yeah, unfortunately, apparently, there's internet connection issue with Dorcas, and as a member of an Indigenous community, I can understand this. And yeah, many Indigenous peoples and local communities are facing this internet connection problem, especially in the remote areas. So in this case, I would like to move to the question and answer session. And please, Christina and Jacob, show us yourself. Please turn on your cameras. Okay, great. I see Christina. And well, in fact, I would like to address you the first question from the audience. So the question is, it was not too clear what is the difference between Sami Doji and Sami made marks. Could you please explain us what is the difference between these two trademarks? Thank you. Christina, please unmute yourself. Just click on this microphone icon.
Okay, now I managed, or maybe the support managed to unmute me. Thank you. So thank you for the question. I will gladly explain the difference. So the oldest trademark that we have is the Sami Duchi mark. And Duchi is the word for our handicraft. So it is a certification mark with the purpose to guide the buyer that the product is made by a Sami person and that it is Duchi, traditional handicraft. And then we have made some criteria for that also, which I could shortly refer to if you would like to.
Okay, thank you, Christina. That was, yeah, thank you for the answer. And the next question,
Oh,
yeah, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to say that the second mark is the new certification mark that we are looking into releasing soon, and it's called Sami Made. And the only purpose of that mark is to guide the buyer that the product is Sami made. So the only criteria also for using that mark is that you are Sami. Or that you are a part of a group or a business that are Sami majority owned. Yeah, so I hope that explained it.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. It explained very well the difference between these two concepts. And Jacob, we also received a question from attendees. It's a general one, and yeah, if you could answer it in shortly, it would be nice. So the question is, could you please explain how to register collective mark or certification mark? So yeah, I believe this question came from perhaps member of indigenous people or a local community. So Jacob, if you could explain us briefly, that would be nice.
Yeah, the registration of either of those marks, it kind of tracks the registration of a standard trademark. Of course, it depends on jurisdiction, and each jurisdiction may have their own not only requirements, but also acceptance of whether you can register a collective or certification mark and in which way you can do that. But generally, it will track the same type of system and requirements as a more standard trademark. The major difference, though, is that your IP office or your registration office, usually what they'll require is that the standard be submitted at the same time. So it takes a little more substance within an application because the registration office will then look at that and see if the standard is sufficient to have a functional either certification mark, or if the regulations on membership are sufficient to have a collective mark. And those relate back to kind of the basic requirements of a trademark. Is it something that can distinguish? And if your standard is not sufficient, then it calls into question that ability for it to distinguish, to set those members or those products, those certified products and services apart from others. So yeah, it will track the same, but just remember it will have that added substantive requirement for the most part.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. And we just received another interesting question, I would say. So the question is there any mark or tool that can serve both as the certification mark and the collective mark?
Let me repeat that, Anna. The question was,
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the question is there any mark or tool that serves both as a certification mark and a collective mark? So something like 2 in 1.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Because then we have to talk about what the mark is in kind of a legal way, or what the mark is in a more identity way, right? A more kind of general way, much like someone would look at, that example of the Microsoft mark that I used, and immediately they'll recall the Microsoft trademark that's on products. But that's, even though you could say it's the same mark. I mean, visually it is, they're tying together one brand identity, yet those embodiments are legally 2 separate marks. One is a trademark used on Microsoft's products. The other one is their certification mark. And even looking at that particular mark, I think it was a Windows 98 or XP mark that I used, it has a trademark within it. So you kind of have a nested mark. So it's difficult to be so bright line and say yes or no. I think a better way to look at it is, a lot of times the way that I present things is that a mark is not, it doesn't stand on its own. It should be part of a protection system. You should think about how all of these tools can work to develop protection around an area that you need. And that may be that you layer protection upon protection and have these different legal mechanisms all supporting each other to provide a fully protected brand identity, or even probably brand identity isn't the best phrase to use in the Indigenous context, but it's understandable that you're protecting that one identity by many aspects of many legal functions. I hope that answered it. That it's a yes and a no.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob, for answering this question. And the next one I would like to address to Christina. So Christina, do you feel any changes since you started to use your trademark? And yeah, what kind of change is, if yes, what kind of changes have you experienced?
Well, both yes and no. Of course, half of the work with trademarks, as Jacob explains, is the power to make the trademark known for the consumers, and it of course requires a lot of financing to be able to build those marketing muscles. But at the same time, I think that with the resources that we have had, I think we have managed quite good since the 80s, because I think we have very strong ambassadors, local ambassadors. We have we work together with the Duchy handicraft organizations in all 4 countries, and they also work as the licensee offices, the national licensee offices, and also through their marketing channels and communities, the trademark is also being marketed and being spread to the world. So I think that it's a yes and no question. You can do a lot with few resources, but a lot of community members spreading the good word. But obviously, we would the trademark would be in a stronger position if the funding was secured at this stage.
Yeah, okay. So thank you, Christina. And yeah, I think we still have we received a lot of questions, but it's time to finish the webinar soon. So I have to end this question and answer session now. And I would like to thank you again, Christina and Jacob, for your participation in this webinar. And I believe that our attendees have learned new and useful information regarding collective marks and certification marks. and their use by indigenous peoples and local communities. And we will be very much looking forward to seeing you again in future sessions of the webinar series, how to protect and promote your culture. So far, we are planning to organize a similar webinar on collective marks and certification marks in Spanish at the end of April, and then a webinar on geographical indications in English at the end of May, and in Spanish at the end of June. And we would recommend you to subscribe to our Traditional Knowledge Update to keep informed about our upcoming activities. And I wish you, all of you, a very nice morning, afternoon, evening, or night, depending on where you are now. Thank you very much for your participation today, and goodbye.